It's also proper for advanced economies like the United States to insist on reciprocity from nations like China that are no longer solely poor countries.
Alright, I think we can all agree we are all entitled to change our positions and our opinions on things. That's just how life works. However, when it comes to reciprocal tariffs, there are some videos surfacing of some very prominent Democrats you may know. Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, and Nancy Pelosi. And by the way, we even have a video of Donald Trump never changing his position on reciprocal tariffs. I'll show you guys that later. It's actually quite fascinating. Now, I will let you guys decide on these flip-flopping of issues. And let me tell you something. When you hear these Democrats, boy, they actually sound like Republicans today.
How far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit and loss of jobs for the American worker? And how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo?
Let me just stop right here. Okay, obviously this is Nancy Pelosi. She was still a Democrat, by the way, in 1996. The reason why I have to say this because, man, I might vote for her if she talked like that in 2025. She sounds like a Republican today. So again, I will let you guys decide on the flip-flopping issues here. Let us continue, but it's quite interesting to see these position change or these emotional changes in some of these candidates, how they were about that life. They were about reciprocal tariffs, saving American jobs. I'm not saying that they are not about saving American jobs today, but man, she sounds a little bit different in my personal opinion.
As I mentioned, it's about jobs, proliferation, and human rights. And there are those who say we shouldn't link human rights and trade and proliferation and trade. I disagree. But if we just want to take up this issue on the basis of economics alone, indeed, China should not receive most favored nation status for several reasons that I'd like to go into now. I'd like to call the attention of our colleagues to this chart on the status quo that the business community is asking each and every one of you, each and every one of us to endorse today.
You can't make this up. I mean, it's insane. Like I said, I understand we could all change our positions, but this one specifically, when we go through the videos, quite the flip-flop here as far as we should want to tariff the heck out of China because we want the best deal ever. Again, Nancy Pelosi sounds like a prominent Republican right now.
Right now, we have a $34 billion trade deficit with China, the 1995 figure. It will be over $40 billion for 1996. Since the Tiananmen Square massacre, this figure has increased 1,000%. From $3.5 billion then to about $34 billion now. In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%.
All right, I think you get the point. My point is, again, totally cool with the position change, but this specifically, I mean, you have Nancy up there with these charts. Meanwhile, you have Donald Trump with his charts, and he gets turned into a laughingstock. He gets told we're bullying our allies. I'm not suggesting that Democrats think China is our allies, but from this video alone, it looks like Nancy Pelosi has absolutely no issue with bullying China back as far as these reciprocal tariffs, or at least getting a better deal. Again, is Donald Trump not doing the same thing? Let's get to Bernie Sanders because his clip is rather interesting as well.
Further, what they have said is that we need to not worry about manufacturing in America, because what we should establish is a policy of unfettered free trade. We don't need tariffs. What we need is to allow corporate America the freedom to throw American workers out on the street, people who are making 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour, health care, pensions, throw them out on the street because somehow, Madam President, we are going to create wealth in America and good paying jobs in America as we shut down plants, we move to China, corporations there pay workers 20, 30 cents an hour, and we bring the product back into this country.
Okay, so a little bit of context. Now, to be fair, Bernie Sanders does sound like a Republican today, but he was actually challenging the Republican policy. Now, we can debate about this, and you guys can leave your opinions down below. The context here is 2008. The economy was not going that great. I am not a defender or an apologist of the Republicans back then. I was just a middle schooler trying to enjoy life, as my parents were dealing with a housing crisis. But what I will say is this. It's almost as if we were in a moment of desperation, trying to figure out how are we going to fund the wars in Afghanistan. Iraq was coming to an end. So again, when you look at the total context, it does make sense why you would have this policy of just work with anybody, make as much money as possible. Obviously not the best choice, but again, the point of this video is, hey, Bernie Sanders sounds like a Republican today, and he is about tariffs because the point of this is to challenge your enemy opponents, or at least make them give you a fair offer. But one thing you will notice is this, is that a lot of these Democrats are campaigning on American workers losing their jobs. That's also a very important point, and that's what Republicans are saying today. What happened? Why did this all of a sudden change?
And anyone who goes shopping in a mall knows how difficult it is today to find the product made in America. But that is the philosophy. And I have to say, in that regard, the champion, and he is honest on this one. Senator McCain has been criticized recently for not being the most honest candidate we have seen in terms of his ads and so forth. He has been honest on this one. He is the lead advocate of unfettered free trade. And that's an also important part of this right-wing ideology, that it is good for America that corporations can go to China and bring products back into this country.
One thing I will say about Bernie Sanders, again, I'm not the Bernie Sanders apologist. I'm not a big fan of his. He was one of the first Democrats to say he is willing to work with Donald Trump, specifically on the credit card situations of these astronomical percentages that people pay. So Bernie Sanders, as you can see on record, he does have a history of actually siding with Republicans or giving them credit when credit is due. So again, this is a rather fascinating clip to see where Bernie Sanders, it's not that he's not about tariffs, so I don't know exactly what's going on. What I do know is the talking point is, well, these are our allies, so how could we tariff our allies? The talking points for Republicans are, that's our point. They are our allies. Why don't we have a fair deal here?
When it comes to the international system of commerce and trade, it's legitimate for poorer countries to continue to seek access to wealthier markets. And by the way, wealthier markets, that's not the big problem that you're having. A small African country is sending you tea and flowers. That's not your biggest economic challenge. It's also proper for advanced economies like the United States to insist on reciprocity from nations like China that are no longer solely poor countries, to make sure that they're providing access to their markets and that they stop taking intellectual property and hacking our servers.
But I want to show you guys the details again. As you'll notice, all of these Democrats are using China as an example. However, Barack Obama used it as a plural. Other countries, China and other countries, developed countries, rich countries. That specific detail is very important because Barack Obama, or if anybody who comments on this and says, well, they're just talking about the enemy of the United States, Barack Obama is implying in this speech developed countries who overcharged the United States, who benefited from us, and who now have some money. They can't be doing this tariff thing with the United States. Again, the point is, why now all of a sudden do we have this flip-flop? Again, very, very easy to use China as an example, but now all of a sudden when Donald Trump brings up the EU, brings up Vietnam, and brings up other countries with super, super high tariffs, now all of a sudden it's an issue. I find that a little problematic, but I will leave it up to you guys how you feel about it.
What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily, I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost...
By the way, this is 1988 to show you Donald Trump was pretty consistent on this specific point, which is pretty crazy.
impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country.
By the way, I'm sorry to cut this off because, again, I'm giving you a legit reaction. I have not watched this yet. Sometimes it can backfire on me and I might be eating my own words, but this time it seems to all be working out. During his first speech when talking about these tariffs with the really big sign, literally said the exact same thing. He even said, I respect these countries. They're taking advantage of us and they're making all this money. Good on them, but now we gotta flip the script. He's even saying it today like he did back then. Pretty crazy.
Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not, but I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country, and if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really...
There you go. He would never want to rule it out totally. Yeah, so you guys, I think I gave you enough evidence or enough clips where you can form your own opinion. Yeah, that was a tornado warning. We are good to go. Let us continue the video because we got to keep working.
Cars, I mean, we're going to be in a very, very difficult situation.
I find it insane that we're all finally concerned about inflation. That was a word that really didn't exist for many years while Joe Biden was president. But I want to point out something. Last night, Richard, you took off your shoe. You said it's made in Vietnam. Yeah, it's going to be 34% more expensive next year. Today, the Secretary General of Vietnam reached out to President Trump and said, we want to have zero tariffs for both countries, proving to some degree that this is a leverage play.
What does that prove, Joe?
It proves.
What does that prove?
Again, nobody is saying that tariffs is the ultimate solution. If anything, it should actually be the last solution. But as you saw from Donald Trump, the reason why now there is such a push for these tariffs, like we saw from those Democrats, back in the day, is to even the playing field.
Because at the end of the conversation, the president said, nice talking to you. And nothing about, we're going to have a deal, lower our tariffs.
I'm going to tell you what it proves.
He said, great conversation.
Let's look historically. 1996, there was a member of Congress who stood on the floor looking at 2% tariffs we had on China, 35% tariffs they had on us. This woman demanded that we had reciprocal tariffs. You know who that was? Nancy Pelosi. 2008, same thing. A guy stood on the Senate floor lamenting.
Reciprocal tariffs.
I'm just saying, they lamented the loss of America's workers.
Lowered its tariff barrier to 0. You know what we did? We raised our tariff barrier to 17%.
Again, just going back. Democrats have repeatedly said, I have a list of quotes here, repeatedly said we should have reciprocal tariffs on different countries and did nothing. They're a party of...
Whether or not you want to call it reciprocal tariffs, if you re-tariff a country for tariffing you, again, I understand there are some economic details here and CNN is looking into the wordplay and the specifics, but let's be honest, it's all the same premise. You're supposed to be our ally. Again, disregard China. Vietnam, you're supposed to be our ally. I know we had some issues back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but now we are actually allies, and we're soon to be military allies, by the way. What I'll say is this. Look, we're re-tariffing you because you're tariffing us 90%. That is the bottom line, and that is why Republicans are okay with this. And apparently Democrats were okay with it not too long ago, but that is why the internet exists and we have the receipts. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. We'll see you guys later. God bless.